Shalom, Kahala Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Rakol Kodash. Double honors my teachers, the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect, who the house of David reborn again in this generation. And Shalom to the 130 Yasharallah, who today are known as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, who before losing their true heritage were known as, and still are, the true Hebrew Israelites of the Holy Bible. In today's lesson, we're going to talk about animal die-offs that have been happening in these last few decades that have been happening because of the devils that run the world. But before we get into that, let's read this. This is Isaiah 24:3. The land shall be utterly empty and utterly spoiled, for Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushai hath spoken this word. The earth mourneth and fadeth away, and the world languisheth and fadeth away. The haughty people of the earth do languish. The earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof, because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinances, broken the everlasting covenant, and therefore hath the curse devoured the earth, and they that dwell therein are desolate. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burnt, and few men left. So that's a prophecy written in Isaiah, talking about how in the end days the world would be in a pitiful case, that the world, through its inhabitants, the people who manage it and run it and rule it, who we know today are the Caucasian race, right, who biblically are known as the Edomites, which the Bible prophesies would be the last biblical ruling nation to rule the earth before the second coming of the Messiah. Well, that scripture says how under the inhabitants of the earth, that it would be defiled and destroyed, that the world would mourn and languish. Right? And what is that term, languish? All right, let's go and look it up real quick. It says, let's see, languish, failing to make progress or to be successful, right? And when that's what this article talks all about, right? It tells you here, this is from the newscientist.com. It says, animal decline is hurting plants' ability to adapt to climate change, right? So you see that? The earth is failing to renew itself, right? You see, the Bible tells you how the Lord, in the beginning of Genesis, created the earth, right? And he created all the systems that make the earth do what it does, okay? Renew itself, be self-sufficient. It's a perfect ecosystem, right? What did the Lord say when he seen that it was done? He said, he looked upon it and said, it is good, okay? Now, what's happened since then, right? Since these Edomites took over, right? And when did that first happen? Well, it tells you that in Maccabees 1:9, after the death of Alexander the Great. It says, and after his death, talking about Alexander the Great, they all put crowns upon themselves, right? This talks about his 4 generals and then eventually his children, their children that would come after them, right? They all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth, right? And you see that when the Edomites first took their taste of power, of rulership over the world, the earth had gone into a bad state. Like it says, man, evils were multiplied, right? And that went on for a long time that way. And then eventually, around 200 AD, when we take a look at the timeline, right? When you look at the timeline, right? The time that the Edomites came into power, which is basically when ancient history finishes, where it finishes off at, right? Because Esau, he believes everything that happened basically before 484 BC, before this, which is basically what the Bible speaks of, is ancient history, right? Well, when these Edomites started to come on the scene in a powerful manner when they started to record history, right? And also when they had taken over the Japhetic Greeks, right? And you could read about this when you read about the Greek Dark Ages, right? You could basically read how the Macedonians, which is what the Edomites were referring to themselves as, came in and basically destroyed the Japhetic Greeks, right? And took over their heritage and their identity. Well, like I had said, Alexander the Great had come onto the scene, and he came and died because he had fulfilled the Lord's will, that is, right, of conquering the earth and putting it under subjection. Now, eventually, Alexander came and also conquered Judea, right, which is basically at that time were the southern kingdom, the so-called Negroes that were in the land, right? We here in the northern kingdom, Israelites, Latinos, and the Native Americans, we had already been over in the Americas about 400 years by the time this had happened. Well, like I had said, by the time that Alexander had died, his 4 generals basically divided up the spoil of Alexander's conquest, right? And from this point is when the Edomites first, like I said, got hold of power. Well, they eventually, it went on, and it went on for a while, and they established, you all hear about when Julius Caesar came on board, right? And then you hear about Cleopatra, who was another Edomite. And then also this is when Herod infiltrates the Judean, right? Basically marries the women of the Maccabean family after, the males were killed off. And that's how his ass got into power. Well, eventually, what happens is, you go through this whole period. This is where the New Testament basically starts off, the gospel, right? Yahushua comes, dies, and the apostles preach, and eventually Jerusalem is sacked in 70 AD. Okay? Well, when you continue on, let's go on, you have a funny thing happen, right? The first so-called Negro, who was Emperor Nerva, right? He was put into power as the emperor, right? And it was done through a political move, because it tells you here, it says, the first Judite emperor of Rome. This begins Judah's control of Rome, ruled at age 65, reigned for 15 months before dying of natural deaths. Now, he had been put into power because he was seen as a safe choice. Basically, the emperors that came before him, it was always being passed down to the descendants of that emperor, and that was basically lead to disastrous results and a lot of infighting and so forth. Well, when you go on from 96 AD to about 100 years later, when the kingdom of the Roman Empire would go back and forth between certain emperors, eventually this man here, this emperor, Septimius Severus, came on the scene, and this basically cemented the rulership of Judah, right, the so-called Negroes, over the Roman Empire, right, and that right there had stopped the reign of the Edomites, and for a while, it stopped the massive influx of evil that had infiltrated the world. Well, what happened is Judah, after he took over Rome, he initiated, what you would know as the Catholic, right? He stopped the pagan Roman Empire from going any further, stopped the worshiping of multiple gods, and basically created the Vatican, right? And basically co-opted the Bible for Romans usage and stuff, right? And then you had the split of the empire. But the point being, let me skip down here, is that the Edomites, losing the Roman Empire, they basically fled up to the Caucasus Mountains, which you would know today as Armenia, Georgia, and those places. Well, Edom stayed up there, right? And these were the actual caves you could see. They look they look just like the mountains in Petra, which is where the Edomites came from, right? That was their ancestral homeland. Well, they eventually moved into the mountains of the Caucasus, which is why, after about 1,000 years, when they started to emerge out of the Caucasus Mountains, they were referred to as the Caucasians, right? And this is where you get the Renaissance, right? This is what they managed to create, right? They basically brought forth their own ideas and knowledge. They erased and destroyed many of the established systems which Judah had basically established. Because again, remember, before, like for the most part, before 1300 AD, Europe was basically ran and ruled over by the so-called Negroes, right? But again, that had stopped because when you go back a little further, this is what happened, right? The plague, the Black Death, which took place from 1162 to 1227, right? And because of this is where you had a lot of intermarrying with different nationalities, right? This is where Esau basically was able to come in. But again, I digress. That's that's a bit of a history lesson there for you, right? And we'll eventually get into that some more. But I just wanted to show you that when these devils, these Edomites, right, the so-called Caucasian race, whenever they would come into power, they always change things around. And why is that? Well, because they are, for the most part, the physical manifestation of Satan upon the earth, just as the Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the Israelites, are the manifestation of God upon the earth, right? Well, let's read what this article has to say, right? It says, declines in birds, mammals, and mammal species are making plant seeds dispersal more difficult, which means plants can't adapt as effectively to climate change, right? It says, losses in the number of birds and mammals are limiting the capacity of plants worldwide to adapt to climate change by curbing seed dispersal. About half of plants rely on animals to disperse their seeds, and research has shown the importance of large animals for transporting seeds over long distances, but the impact of wildlife declines on seed dispersal hasn't been measured at a global level before, which Evan Frick, a Rice University, Texas, set out to address. You see that? So with all the animals that have been dying off, the birds, because of the the radio signals that are being put in the air from the 5Gs to just general radiation that's in the air now, from the Wi-Fi signals, radio stations, the digital signals that are going out, all that affects these birds, man. This is why you see birds attacking these antennas, because again, they can feel that there's something going on, but eventually these poor birds die off, right? And besides that, like it said, mammals are also dying off. These are those like, like the, what would you call them? Like the skunks, the otters, and what are those little bandit animals called? The, not rascals, raccoons, things like that, right? Like animals that are, their job is to go eat these fruits and these berries and go out and then go to the restroom and spread out these seeds. See, these animals are dying off because of urbanization, right? Cities are being set up, right? Cities that these Edomites have set up and have destroyed the ecosystem, right? So that, along with destroying the air, the water, right? See, because again, it's not your average Negro, Latino, Native Americans doing this, man. See, we don't own the factories. We don't own the banks that finance all these systems, right? We don't have the fleets of boats going out and freaking, scooping up these tons and tons of fishes out of the ocean, right? We're not the ones that are scooping out all these, oysters, clams, lobsters, crabs, things that are meant to filter out the water. No, man. It is the people who are in power. And who are those people? It's the Edomites, the so-called Caucasians, the people who own the banks, who own these businesses, who put their names on the land, who go and reap and take until, their profits, show a sign of fullness. But even at that point, they're still not satisfied, right? To the point where now the earth is languishing, it's being destroyed, right? And you go on. This isn't just like the first time this has happened, man. Here's another post that tells you, says, like in post-apocalyptic movies, heat waves kill the marine wildlife in mass. An early estimate points to a huge die-off along the Pacific coast, and scientists say rivers further inland are warming to levels that could be lethal for some kind of salmon, right? And check this out, man. See, I remember when I was a kid, and the rivers where I grew up here in Los Angeles, man, you could go up to these rivers and the water was clean, perfect, pristine, man, right? But now, when you go up to there now, these rivers, they're still floating, but they're filled with algae, right? That green moss that grows. And why is that? Well, because the earth and these rivers are heating up, right? And with that extra heat, now moss and all this algae is able to grow, and that creates a whole other. It basically throws the entire system off, man, right? Just like it shows you here, man. All of these temperature changes, right? Even though we can handle it, right? A lot of these animals in their ecosystem can't handle it, right? Because one thing is that, you know, the plants won't bloom, or the algae will bloom in one place but not in another. And what that does is it starves a lot of these animals out. Or it's you've Akim have probably heard it on the news where you hear about the red bloom algae, which is hazardous to your health if you go swim in certain oceans at certain times of the year, usually around springtime. You know, these are the things that are a result of this earth being defiled, because again, the ordinances which the Bible has set and God had put forth, these devils that run the earth, they don't deal with that, man. They eat the abominable food which has been set there to be filters upon the earth. They harvest or they farm the lands longer than what they're supposed to, not giving the earth a year of jubilee, which is a year of rest. Right? These are just some of the things going on. Right? And here's another statistics I just wanted to show you, man. It tells you, it says a quarter of all species are threatened with extinction, right? Share of plant animal species at risk of extinction worldwide. So look at this, man. 40% of amphibians, 34% of conifers, 33% of reef coral, marine mammals, 33%, sharks and rays, 31%, selected crustaceans, 27%, mammals, 0.25%, birds, 14%. So you see, this is the percentage of the animals from these categories that are looking to no longer exist. Because why? Because these devils who run this world have destroyed it, and they've destroyed it for profit, right? So that way they can have and people can want, right? And here's another statistic that I wanted to show too. This shows the listings under the Endangered Species Act, right? Since when the Endangered Species Act was initiated in 1967, this just shows you how many animals have been put on this list, right? So it tells you, man, that it just shows you, right? The numbers don't lie. That from back then to about 2015, the numbers have just increased. So more animals are dying off, and hence the earth is not able to, it's now gone to the point where the earth is just not able to function as it's supposed to, man. It's languishing, it's failing to do its purpose, right? The original blueprint that the Lord had set up with the angels of Elohim, right? That blueprint, that design has now been damaged, man. And again, because this is the way that Satan has set up his people, man, to be adverse to what's good upon the earth. This is 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. Right? And what is perdition? Perdition is a state of eternal punishment, of damnation, into which a sinful and unpenitent person passes after death. Right? Basically, it also means destruction. Right? So that damnation, you see, these Edomites, these people who are upon the face of the earth, who are ruling it right now, man. See, what's going to happen before the second coming of the Messiah is that the world is going to realize who the devil is upon the earth. They're going to realize that the devil, even though these Caucasians love to play him on TV as jokes, and they like to throw up the devil horns and everything, people are going to realize that there really isn't a red-horned ponytail with a trident, underground. People are going to realize that isn't the devil. They're going to realize that the devil are these Edomites, right? And how is that going to happen? Well, first and foremost, because you have us out here, the prophets of the Lord, prophesizing what the Bible has told us to prophesy about, and revealing these devils for what they're doing, right? Like Apostle Kabar says, man, we're exposing these Edomites for who they are, right? And we're not saying anything that isn't true. We're simply just stating the facts. We're showing through history who these people are. This is why these devils are trying to attack critical race theory, because they're trying to hide their history. This is Revelations 11 and 18. And the nations were angry, and thy wrath is come, and the time of the dead, that they should be judged, and that thou shouldest give reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and them that fear thy name, small and great. And here's the point. And shouldest destroy them which destroy the earth. Right? And who is destroying the earth, Hakeem? Right? You don't need me to tell you, man. We all know. We all know who are running these coal mines where we could easily move over to solar, wind, all these different type of energies, alternative energies, right? Who has shelved these technologies that could increase battery storage above 25%, so that we wouldn't have to worry about energy. Who does war for resources, man? Who, when they go to war, pollute the ground with spent uranium, right? These devils, man, these Edomites, these people who have destroyed the earth. And that's why the Bible makes it very clear, man, that the Lord is going to destroy them who destroy the earth. Right? So I just wanted to, point out these articles, man, to show you, man, that the world, we're in a bad shape, man. The people and the earth, man. And we need the Lord to come back soon. So, hopefully this video was edifying. Until the next time, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Kokodash. God honors my teachers, the apostles and elders, great millstone. Peace and mercy to the elect. Shalom.